Hello and welcome back to DriveDriverDriven. I'm Humble, and today it's time for some real work on the MK. I sort of went over it briefly last episode, but basically today we need to Control Z a whole bunch of stuff off the car so that we can move this build forward. Let me spin the camera around, take you through sort of what I'm hoping to do today, and we'll see how far we get. As I mentioned before, basically we need to strip the car back down to prepare for our final assembly. What that entails is we need to pull the engine harness out, we got to pull our oil tank out, pull the cooling package off, and if we can get to it today, I would also like to have the engine and transmission out of the car. That might be a tall ask, but that's what I'm aiming for. Without further ado, I'm going to put you guys into time lapse and we're going to get this work started. Back out of time lapse, got the engine out, got it sitting over here on a little cart. One thing I forgot that I still needed to do is we still need to clean up the transmission here from how we hacked that up, and I'm probably just going to take a flap disc to smooth that out. We had to do that to clear the chassis back here. Back in this area, it would probably fit without going to such extreme measures to cut off the PPF mount, but it was nice, just peace of mind knowing that there won't be contact there. So I just need to go through and clean that up, just with a grinder or a flap disc or something like that. With the engine out though, we can see what we have left to clean up down here. So this is the area where there was a bracket that sat here, and we had to cut that out in order to drop the K24 in. If you're not running this dry sump setup. So this is the reason why, is because normally the pan up in this area actually cuts back and then down, and you don't need to cut the chassis to clearance up here. But because I have this dry sump system, this sticks down enough or in such a way that it just doesn't clear that chassis member up in this area, and no amount of trying to force would get past it. It was just a hair too little room. So we cut that bracket out, and I still need to clean up these chassis tubes a little bit, grind that weld down, and then paint and seal it. But I'm going to put a little aluminum tray up in this area to mount our oil air separator up in that area in front of the engine, which should shorten the plumbing a little bit. Well, we'll see. I'm still kind of hurrying and humming about where that's going to go. But otherwise, I need to fix our front brakes. While I'm at it, the front brake lines used to run up and up through here and across this same little cross member. And when we tried to drop the motor in the first time, we crunched those brake lines, attempting to get the engine in. So I need to redo that while we have the engine out and make sure that it's clear of the engine path. So I think I'm going to route that in a different way the second time around. Elsewise, down here in this pan, I've sort of marked it up. It's kind of hard to see, but right in the middle of where this pan is, underneath this tank, I'm just going to make an access hole for the drain bolt on the tank. So down here, this guy, so that I can reach up through that hole and pull the drain plug for oil changes. That'll just make life a lot easier. And then I think that's the last of it while we have the engine out. I need to run the wiring a little bit better, and since the engine's out, that's a little easier to reach. And we can maybe do some preliminary fuel run or fuel hose run, at least get the rear done, which is going to be the dumb end. We'll just do that first, run it forward, and then leave it loose in the front so that when the engine trans go back in, we can terminate to length. But that's not absolutely necessary. We can do that with the engine in or out. It doesn't matter. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. I also pulled the battery and little battery tray. So this is just like a high temperature, I don't know, plastic or composite. And I did this, it's just honking piece, but I just did this to make the area look nice and provide some clearance over the bolts for the back of the oil tank mounts, or rather the riv nuts that these go into, and put the battery on the bulkhead there. There's probably a better way to do it with spacers on the tray, but I kind of like the way this looks, even though it's a big chunk of plastic. It's fine. Ultimately, this car is going to have more power than I know what to do with. So what I have to do, though, is trim this edge, which I marked up with a marker. And it's got to come back maybe like an 1/8 inch or a little bit more to clearance the panel that goes down this side here. Just because it tucks in right here, and there just wasn't enough room for it. And we're talking like, you know, widths of a hair kind of thing. Like I couldn't squeeze it in while that block was in place. So what I need to do is just trim it back a little more, make sure that everything's clearanced well enough and that I can get that through there. It was a bit of a job wrestling the engine in and out of the car. It always is. And part of the problem is the whole engine cants over to the side a little bit. And as soon as you pull it off the engine mounts, it wants to hang straight up and down, and that binds the bolt way in the back underneath the tail end of the transmission. And so you saw me fighting and wiggling trying to get it out. But with an extra pair of hands, thanks to Perrin for coming and helping me out, like we were able to get it out just fine. It's just, you got to watch for a few things here and there and make sure that it clears the chassis okay. So next step, we're going to go through and start cleaning up the chassis and get those welds ground down. And then I would like to get some paint on it today so that we can let that paint cure overnight. So let's get onto it. All right, same video, new day, wardrobe change. Last we left off here, you just saw me put some paint on the chassis and do a little cleanup work. So let's take a look at that really quick, and then we'll get on to the next step, which is cleaning up the roughness around the PPF cut on the transmission. So it's not the most perfect paint job. It's a little rough. It's actually even still a little tacky because it was cold last night. But the paint that I found, this engine enamel, happened to be a good match. So it's this just Rust-Oleum, and I had a couple of different yellows, and so I did some test sprays to see what was close. And I had kind of a white primer, but it ended up dying on me. So I tested it on primer and then just by itself. And I was able to lay down just a nice little thick coat. Yeah, it's a little runny, whatever. No one's gonna see this unless something's gone terribly wrong, because I do plan on putting an aluminum plate here over the top of it. I just wanted to seal the chassis enough that we're not gonna have rust problems or anything going forward. And it's a nice little test because if I ever get chips on the chassis, the control arms, or the cage, as will happen, this stuff is a perfect paint match for the chassis. So the chassis paint code is Signal Yellow. That's just the name of the powder coat. It's pretty much ubiquitous. You can find that color at any powder coat shop. It's the same color I did for the wheels. So I could also use this same paint for wheel touch-ups, which is good to know. It's good information to have. So with that done, the other thing I did was I mentioned this little block of like plastic, whatever the hell, for our footwell, and I just trimmed off about an 1/8 inch. I mean, that's all I needed is the thickness for like these panels. And I just trimmed off an 1/8 inch off this edge, made a hell of a mess, which I had to drag the vacuum out to clean. But with that trimmed, when I go to put all of this stuff back in the car and put this panel back on, I should be able to slip it in place. And I don't want to do that though until we get our plumbing run from the back to the front, so our fuel lines, etc. I just want to make sure that's done and everything's cinched up and looking nice, and then we'll seal up the tunnel. All right, on to the next thing here. So on the transmission, so this is a close-up look of where we sort of chopped off the PPF. It's not a beautiful cut, but because of the shape of it and access with the cutoff wheel that we were using at the time, I just need to sand this down, remove all these rough edges, and try to make it look just a little nicer rather, and remove all the sharp edges, so if we do need to reach around it or whatever, you're not going to cut the hell out of your arm. I have a couple of flap discs that I'm going to start with, like a 60 grit flap, and then gradually increase it from there for some finish work. I don't think I'll need to spend that much time on it, because just based on what it did to this steel chassis, the aluminum work should go pretty quick. So let me set up the camera and we'll get started. All right, still not the prettiest, but it's a lot smoother and cleaner than it was. I'm not gonna slice my arm open on any of those edges. And again, this is all gonna be tucked way up into the chassis and you're not gonna see it anyway. I just wanted to remove the risk of injury trying to reach around it, which I think I've accomplished. So that went about as well as I had hoped. I could go farther, but again, I don't think it's necessary to spend any more time on this, being that it's going to be tucked into the chassis and hidden away. So moving on, one last thing I want to take care of in this video. Well, one last mess to make, and that is the hole that our exhaust needs to come out of. Now, originally when I placed this, I had the idea of just custom making the exhaust from the get-go. Trying to make this work with the factory exhaust, this hole is too far forward. It'll work well for what I have planned, but not for using the factory exhaust in the interim. So what I need to do is I'm just going to make this hole a little bit bigger, and that should give plenty of room. And then later down the road, once I have the new custom exhaust fabricated, I've mentioned before about putting like a metal trim plate around, and I think I'm still going to do that. Maybe a stainless steel or an aluminum plate that's painted bronze to match the eventual color scheme, or go with black, like a satin black, which again should match the color scheme. I would like to use carbon, but I don't know if it'll tolerate the high heat around the exhaust area, so I think sticking with a metal of some sort is going to be the play. This sort of protective barrier that I've had on the car for a while now was, I won't say somewhat difficult, but it was a little difficult to peel back, which has me concerned. I think I want to pull this up sooner than later to get it off the car. And I think once I'm not making any more cuts, messes, edits to the body or chassis, I think it's time to finally pull this stuff back. So I'll be looking forward to that and seeing the car in its sort of finished flavors. So next up, I'm going to start attacking this area. I've got a few more lines to make. Basically, my idea is to make this as wide as it is tall. So that'll make this just a 7x7 opening, which is more than enough for the size of pipe work that I have in mind. And then again, we'll just reduce it with a metal trim plate in the future. So that being said, let's get on it. cleaned up a little prematurely in the middle there, but I have this hole widened out. I think I'm going to do the same trick here that I did elsewhere, which is to just hit the edge of this with like a paint pen. So it doesn't have exposed fiberglass and it looks a little more deliberate. I really hated having to cut into a painted panel, but I think it went fairly well. And again, if any of this would have had an issue, we would just hide our crimes with a metal panel anyway. So that being said, I did my best to match the radius of the other corners, at least temporarily while it's uncovered. This is plenty of room for the exhaust to come through, so I'm not too worried about that. And I think with that done, that is the last of the mess that we need to make, at least up here. We will still have to do some trimming for the rear kind of luggage bin, but otherwise, I think we're ready to get the engine and transmission back into the car. I think I'm going to call it there though. We'll save the engine and transmission for next time. I know it's been a long time coming, but it really feels good to get back on this project, get some wrench time in the garage, and finally make a little bit of forward momentum on this project. I know there's a lot of people looking forward to seeing the end result, me too. And hopefully those days aren't too far down the road. So thanks again for all your patience. Until next time, thanks for watching.